Hello and welcome to Chicken Google Soup's Blender Tutorial Series Part 3. Today we are going to rig and animate this 3D modeled creature that we have created in the previous two tutorials. As you can see, it has a full texture and a full model, but it's not rigged. We're going to fix that today in this tutorial. In order to rig a 3D creature, you must first make sure that your cursor is centered in the center of the grid by pressing Shift-C. I have said that in previous tutorials, but if you want to go ahead and use this tutorial, I'll reiterate Shift-C is to center your cursor to the grid. In order to start rigging, we first need to have an armature. In order to add an armature, you go up to the top in Object Mode and press Add. Then you add armature and then single bone. You'll notice that I have some plugins for other things in my Blender file. You won't have those. So I just suggest that you ignore them. Now we have a single bone. This bone here is not in the mesh. But we're going to start forming it to the shape of the mesh, making a skeleton of sorts, as they are often called. In order to do that, we have to go to Edit Mode and select the bone. What we want to do when making an armature is make sure that the root bone is the hips of the model. The hips, the pelvis, whatever you want to call it, just make sure it's at the center of gravity. So in order to start moving the bone, we will select the Move tool and press Z to go to wireframe. And now we are going to move the bone to the position of the pelvis, like so. And then we'll press R, then X, to rotate along the X-axis and move the tail end of the bone towards the head. We are also going to shrink down the pelvis considerably. And now we're going to move our way to the head. In order to make another bone, we do the same thing as we do with the mesh. We press the E key to extrude. Now we're going to press E, then Y, in order to extrude the bone along the y-axis. We are making the torso now. Press E, then Y again to make the chest. Press E, then Z to move the bone up when you extrude it. This will make the neck. E, Z, as 1, 2, 3. Haha, couldn't resist putting a joke in there. And now we're at the head. Press E, Y to make the head. You don't need to add any extra bones after the head, but to make it easier to rig, I am going to add another bone to the beak. E, Y to make the beak. And now for the jaw. The jaw is tricky, but this will help you learn how to make a jaw. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new bone separated from the head and the beak by duplicating one that is already attached to the head. In order to do this, I press Shift-D to duplicate, then press Y to move it along the y-axis. I'm going to place the head of the bone where I would imagine a jawbone to be, where the jawbone would rotate at. That is the pivot point of the bone. I would imagine the head of the bone to be here, where the pivot is right here. So the mouth will open more realistically. Now we need to add something to help ease rigging. We are going to press E and Y to add another beak bone to the bottom beak. This will keep it easier when weight painting. And then we're going to add the tongue. In order to add the tongue, this is what I like to do. EZ, make a base bone to extrude from, then extrude the first bone. And then delete this bone. It'll stay parented to the jaw. And now we keep going until we finished the tongue. You'll notice that all these bones at the top are named funny. These are automatic generated names. We'll have to rename all the bones later. A helpful tip for making tongues, tails, and other things that taper to a point. You'll want the bones to become smaller the closer it is to the end, and wider towards the base. Let's start renaming these bones. This one is going to be called pelvis in Bone Properties on the right-hand panel. This one is going to be called torso, not torso, torso. This one will be called chest with a lowercase h. In order to check the parenting of bones, you can select a bone and go down to relations to see what it's connected to. This torso, this bone, this chest is connected to torso. The neck is connected to chest. Let's name this neck 1. If you want it to be a different kind of rig, you can also disconnect the bones from each other. Select the neck and disconnect it from the chest. Now you can put the chest here if you want. This will make it easier to rig things as well. Now, neck 2. Oh, that's the wrong neck 2. Head. Top. Beak. Jaw, which is connected to the head. Amazing. And bottom beak. Now we're going to name the tongue bones. And we're going to disconnect all the tongue bones from each other to make a tongue that can stretch. Disconnect. Rename. Disconnect. Rename. Disconnect. Rename. Disconnect. Now, for a tongue like this, 5 bones may not be necessary, but I added them just to show you you can add a lot of bones if you want. And now we're going to move on to the arms and legs and tail. In order to add a bone that faces backwards from the head, all you got to do is extrude. This one will not be connected to the pelvis, as you can see here. And it won't be parented to the pelvis either. In order to fix that, we are going to set the parent in the Relations tab to pelvis, which should be at the top. Now this tailbone will rotate with the pelvis, which is good. We're going to add 2 more tailbones. Move them accordingly and rename. And now we're going to move on with the legs. To rig the legs, you're going to copy one of these bones, Shift D, and move along the x-axis. Rotate along the x-axis as well. And move the bone to the position where the hip will pivot. It's usually towards the center of the top of the hip. Make sure it looks like it connects to the body. This will be called hip.L, as it is the left hip. This will come in useful later. Now, move the hip down to the knee joint. And now extrude along the y-axis until you get to the ankle. Make sure to check it from all angles. This will be knee.L. Now, make the ankle. Move it towards almost the bottom of the foot, like about here, and check your angles. This will be ankle.L. And now to make the feet and toes. Select the bottom of the ankle, the tail of the ankle bone, EZ, and move it towards just about the base of the toes. But not at the base of the toes. We're going to show you why later. This is foot.L. And now we're going to make the toes. Toes, when you're looking at a foot bone, are placed inside the foot at the base for more realistic bending. So we're going to start by EY and then moving it to the base of the first pad. And a little bit out of the pad. This will be center toe 1.left. EY to get to the other toe digit, center toe 2.left. And now we're going to move this all the way to the end of the claw. Add a new bone and move it to the end of the claw. This will be center toe 3.left. And now we're going to copy these bones with Shift D and move along the x-axis, rotate Z, and reposition them and rename the bones. The tailbone position doesn't matter, but it's advised to move the tailbone position so that you know where it ends. This will be outer toe 1.L, outer toe 2.L, outer toe 3.L. Now, you may be wondering, why am I naming all these bones? It's for organization reasons. Do the same thing you did with the outer toe and rotate and move accordingly. Now, the organization reasons for renaming bones is that you know what each bone is always. This will help you when animating. This will help you in symmetrizing. Inner toe 1.L, inner toe 2.L with the lowercase o, inner toe 3.l with a lowercase o. I tend to do that, capitalizing my words. Funny. It's because I'm a fast typer, but I digress. Now, we're going to move on to the arms, making sure that the root of the hip is parented to pelvis. Always make sure to do that. Always parent your bones to the pelvis when they are connected to the pelvis. But if they are not connected to the pelvis, then parent to the bone you think would move with it the best. This arm, this shoulder here, will be parented to the chest because we want the arms to move with the chest. So we're going to shift D along the x-axis and move to the left side, and we're going to make a shoulder bone. You see it's connected to the torso as a parent. We want to move it to the chest so that everything moves with the chest. This will be our shoulder. Let's rename it. Shoulder.L, because we are still on the left side. I tend to do the left side first, but it doesn't matter which side you start with. Now we're going to press E and move the bone. You'll see that I didn't move along an axis this time, and that's because the arm kind of splays outward, and for me it's easier to press E and extrude without an axis on the arms. This will be called upper arm.L. Now we're going to extrude until we get to the wrist, which would be at the base of the paw pad. This will be lower arm.L. Now we're going to make hand and fingers. Extrude the hand until you get to about the same as the toes, which would be the base of the paw pads. This will be hand.L. And we're going to do the same thing with the fingers that we did with the toes. Extruding toward the claws makes it easier to rig the claws to the proper hand. I mean finger. If you wanted to do this, sometimes the claws will rig to the wrong finger. That is why I like to move the bone to the end of the finger. We don't want crazy fingers happening. So now you'll see this finger looks kind of different. Some of the digits were too short for me, so I lengthened them a little towards the back right here. Well, this is how it works for paws. For human fingers, it might be different. But these are paws, not human fingers. So I'm going to call this inner finger 1.L, or you can name it index. Index finger 2. And index finger 3.L. And now we're going to make the middle and the ring fingers. This creature only has 3 fingers, no thumb, no pinky. That's how I like to do it. When you look at a human hand, if you remove digits from the outside until you get ones that are in the middle. The paw looks mostly like an index, a middle, and a ring finger. If you wanted to do a 3-fingered creature with a thumb, you would take the thumb, the index, and the middle finger. If you wanted to do a creature that had 4 fingers and a thumb, just do a human hand. If you wanted to do a creature with 3 fingers and a thumb, remove the pinky. And that's how I do hands. Now we're going to Shift D, rotate. These fingers are about the same size. So resizing will be a snap. Now rename these bones. Middle finger 1.L, middle finger 2.L, and remember your capitalization. Some programs are case sensitive if you want to animate them in different programs. Let me make sure I did that. Sometimes my second letter is capitalized. There we go. Now for the ring finger, Shift D, rotate, and move the bones accordingly. Remember, the head of the bone right here is where a joint will pivot. Right here. So you want to put them realistically where the joints will be. Ring finger 1.L, ring finger 2.L, and ring finger 3.L. Checking capitalization. Everything should be parented to this wrist, which it is. I'm going to move the hand bone a little bit down, kind of overlapping the other bones, and pointing down a little bit. This will make it easier to rig the paw pad at the base. And now we're going to do the eye. The eye is somewhat tricky, but I'll show you a tip on how to make the eyes rotate very, very smoothly. As you'll notice, the eye is a sphere. And with an eye, you'd want the bone to be at the very center of this sphere so that when the bone rotates, the eye doesn't move wonky. And I'll show you how to do that now. We're going to make the eye. Select the head bone and press Shift D. This will be the left eye, I.L. And now it's parented to the neck, so we're going to change that to parent to the head. And make sure it's not connected. This tailbone position doesn't matter, but I like to keep it in the direction the eye is going. Now, move the bone to where you think the center of the eye will be. It doesn't have to be exact because I'll show you the tip on how to move it properly. Go back into object mode, select the eye, go into edit mode, and select one eye piece. This is the left eye. You only need to select this one. Now, go down and find this arrow. Under the Item tab under Transform, record the X, Y, and Z positions of the eye, because this is where the center of the eye is, as indicated by the white circle. We're going to copy and paste these locations into the head of the bone for the eye. So take this, press Ctrl C to copy, and we're going to go back into the bone, edit mode, go into the head, Ctrl V, and now it is moved to the X position properly. Do the same thing for the head's Y and Z coordinates. Now you've made the eye position properly within the center. Reposition the tail if you want. It doesn't matter, but I like to make it come out of the pupil. Now it's time to symmetrize the the armature. Haha, I messed up. Now it's time to symmetrize the armature. In order to symmetrize the armature, you'll have to select everything that you have named with the suffix .l. This is very important that you have suffixed it with the side. If you started with the right side, you'll suffix these bones with .r. It's very important to do this. And now, with all the .l bones selected, we go to armature at the top, then symmetrize. Now the bones will be on the other side properly. You've now made a full armature for the creature. Let's go back into pose mode. Go into solid view and you'll see that these bones aren't see-through. We can fix that. In the armature object data properties, go into viewport display and select in front. Now the bones will show through the mesh. You can rotate these bones with the R key, but you'll notice that these bones don't make the mesh move yet. It's because we haven't actually rigged the model yet. I'm going to change these shapes to stick. It's easier for me to see that way. Alright, we're going to rig this mesh to the armature. In order to rig the mesh to the armature, go into object mode. Now select the mesh and then select the armature with Shift and whatever mouse button you have. For me, it's right click, but for most people, it'll be left click. Now press Ctrl P to parent the object. Set the parent to armature deform with automatic weights. Now, go back into pose mode when selecting the armature. You'll notice that the leg now moves properly with the bones. You'll notice the same for the arms, the tail, not the eyes and tongue yet, but we'll get to that later. Let's test the fingers. The claws move with their appropriate fingers. Now let's test the toes. Everything seems all right here. Now let's test the head. In order to test the head, start by moving the jaw. RX to move the jaw. You'll see that some of the top beak moves improperly with the jaw. Let's test the tongue. You'll notice that the tongue moves the jaw as well. And now let's move the eyeball. You'll notice that the eyeball moves the head. Now how do we fix that? Well, we're going to start weight painting. Weight painting is the bane of every Blender user's existence. But not mine. I got really good at it, so I'm going to show you how. Not to brag. Now for the daunting task of weight painting. First, we're going to select a bone, go into object mode with that bone selected before we went there, then shift select the mesh. Now we're going to go into weight paint mode. Now go to the vertex groups in the properties window on the right hand side. Select the vertex group for the bottom beak. Everything seems to be fine. Select the vertex group for the jaw. And now we're going to use the subtract tool to subtract the weights from the top beak. Now we're going to subtract the weights from the tongue. We actually do not need the tongue bones in the jaw. So what we're going to do is we are going to actually remove these vertex groups. Remove this vertex group, remove tongue 2, tongue 3, tongue 4, and tongue 5. And now the jaw seems to move properly with the mouth. Let's check the other weights. Let us also remove the I.L and I.R weights. Testing occasionally in pose mode to see if there's unweighted vertices. If there are unweighted vertices, you should assign them using the Add brush in Weight Paint. It seems as though the top of the head moves with the jaw. That's not ideal, and we're going to fix that. Go back into Weight Paint mode in the same way we did before. Find the bone that's causing the issue. Go to the Subtract button in the Brushes menu. Subtract the top of the head. Now the jaw should move properly. We're also going to blur the jaw using the blur tool to make everything blend nicely. Use the subtract tool again to make sure the eye sockets stay in place. Use the add tool to add more weights. Keep waiting until you're satisfied with the result. Now we're going to rig the eyes and the tongue. Just do the same thing you did before. Shift select the mesh, Control P, and automatic weights. Now everything for the tongue should be fine. But as you'll notice, the bottom of the tongue comes out from the bottom of the jaw. This is actually a problem in the mesh for the body. So we're going to fix that. We have to figure out what's causing the issue and correct it. In this case, it was the head bone that was causing the issue. And re-blur to smoothen things out. Now the tongue is properly hidden. Now we're going to rig the eyes manually. In order to manually rig, we are first going to select the eyes. Then go to Modifiers. Add the Armature modifier, like this. And now, under the Object field, select the Armature. And now, add 2 vertex groups. This will be the name of the bones that the eyes will be rigged to. In this case, it'll be I.L and I.R. Now to weight paint the eyes. Select the armature, then select the eyes, and go to weight paint. We're going to view this locally. Go to View, Local View, toggle Local View. Press the numpad period key to recenter, and select one of the eye bones. Make sure that in your tools, symmetry is on, but not here, only mirror vertex groups. Now we're going to just brush paint, the weight paint onto the eye of the bone we selected. You'll notice that if we select this vertex group, maybe we should be mirroring. Let's try that. Yes. Make sure mirror X is on. Reweight. And now, each eye is weighted accordingly. You can test out the rotation of the bones in pose mode. We're going to exit local view. Test the rotation. Seems as though the eyes move accordingly, and they don't come out of the socket. To clear all the rotations, select all the bones and press Alt-R. Pressing Alt-R clears rotations. Pressing Alt-G clears locations, and pressing Alt-S clears scale. So if you wanted, and you messed up your mesh like this, Alt-S. If you messed up like this, Alt-G. Now you'll know how to reset your skeleton. Now, for the next part of the tutorial, we are going to animate this creature. In order to make an animation for a creature, we need to be in pose mode. And we need to have the action editor open. We are going to make a new window for the action editor. First, split horizontally to make a new window. And select the dope sheet for the new window. In order to get to the dope sheet, get to the action editor from the dope sheet, select this, then action editor. You'll see that a new button popped up. This is where your actions will be. To create a new action, hit New, and you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to make an animation where the creature scratches its head. So I'm going to call it Head Scratch. To animate the creature now, we are going to start by applying this base pose. Select all the bones and press I, lock, rot. Where is it? Location and rotation. This will only record the location and rotation. It will not record the scale of the mesh in the animation. We just made the base pose. And now to animate, we're going to try moving the chest down. And then, before we move the chest down, we are going to change the timeline position to 20 frames. R, X, press I, location and rotation. When we scroll through the animation, now it looks like the chest bends down. We are going to move the head down now. And now you'll see that the different parts of the animation play at different times. We can do really cool things with that. First, let's make the end frame. The end frame is going to be the same pose as the beginning frame. So all we have to do is press Shift D with all these keyframes for the first frame selected by selecting the top dot. Shift D and move to the end of the animation, which I'm going to put at 100 frames. And at the timeline at the bottom, set the end frame to 100. Now it'll be like this. It looks more like a bow instead of a scratch, but we are going to fix that with some animating. Go back to where you want the arm to move. And move the arm towards the head accordingly. Select all the bones that moved and go lock, rot, or location rotation. Now it's starting to look more like a scratch. Let's keep the head down and move the head a little bit as we rotate the claws inwards. Being careful not to scratch his delicate face with those sharp claws. Just lightly graze the top of his head. we're going to curl his hand. Make sure to make it look anatomically accurate. And we're going to keep the head down a little bit. Animation tip. We're going to add a little bit of resistance to this animation by making a frame where the keys are very close together. Like so. Now it looks like he's resisting the claws in a way. We can make this repeat to make it look like he's scratching his face multiple times. So we're going to make a new frame, and we're going to select every bone that we have animated, and eye, location, rotation. We just made a new base frame to start with. Now we're going to duplicate this to make it repeat. Shift D, and now it should repeat. And we can make it go several times if we wanted. All while the chest is moving back up. We can also add more to the animation with the legs and the tail to make it come more alive. We're going to do that. Just make some mid frames and rotate. You can put these anywhere in the animation as long as it looks realistic. We're going to give some damping to the tail. And we're going to make the legs wobble a bit. In order to make a little leg wobble, we're going to move the pelvis bone. R, Y, I, R, Y, I. Now we're going to correct for the legs on these frames. R, Y, Y. Now you see this foot doesn't touch the ground, and the other one touches the ground too much. So we're going to bend the legs just a little bit. And we might make the leg that's touching the ground a little bit more have spread toes. And a little more pressure applied. We might want to make this one, it's not touching the ground enough, have a lighter pressure on it, like with toes closer together. Now we're going to key all the leg bones. I, location, rotation. Now let's go from frame 0 to 29. Now we're going to fix 70. In order to do that, we might actually mirror this animation for the bones. So what we're going to do is we're going to take frame 29, Control C to copy pose while you're in the window of the 3D view. Now we're going to go to frame 70. We're going to go pose, paste pose flipped. And now we're going to apply that. You'll notice there's still a little wobbling and sliding. We can fix that with IK systems. I'll show you how to do IK systems in a more advanced video after the main tutorial. But for now, we can correct the sliding manually. Just go to where the sliding is the worst and at least try to correct it manually. Now it doesn't slide that much. Now we're going to animate the arm, the other arm. Just a little bit. Now, the bird looks like he's scratching his face. Preview the animation to see if you like it. If you like it, then you're done and you can make a new animation. Press the shield button to keep this one and make a new animation. Rename it, and we can do whatever we want with it. So like, let's say we can make a variant of this head scratch with a more active tail. We can rename that. And now we're going to make the tail more active. Scroll down to where your tail bones are. Try to find where there's not frames. And we're going to add more frames. We're going to make the tail wag a bit. And yes. I like to make them swish using this method. We can also delete keyframes with the X key, like this. And we can continue to make the tail wag. We did get rid of a hip bone accidentally in this animation, so we're going to add it back. Just one keyframe. We're going to find that keyframe, select the hip, Control C, and add it back. Control V. And then apply. Now this one has a more active tail. Press the shield button if you want to keep it. Remember to save your work. And now you've made a simple idle animation for your character. Thank you for watching this video on how to make a creature for Blender 3D. This tutorial was part 3 of 3, and if you have made it this far, congratulations! You know the basics of making a 3D creature. I will be making more advanced tutorials that are shorter on how to do more advanced things like IK and other things of that nature. Thank you for watching. I'm Chicken Google Soup, and I'll see you soon.